Welcome to this TSASC Tech Talk regarding arc fault circuit interrupters. Today we're going to talk about arc fault protection of dwelling units. Let's discuss what an arc fault is, when arc fault protection came to the Canadian Electrical Code, or CEC for short, and how it has evolved. And finally, what are the acceptable methods to install arc fault circuit interrupter or AFCI protection in Saskatchewan? Everyone wants to know, what is an arc fault? Why the extra expense and effort for something that wasn't even a thing in the 1990s? Yes, some of us got our ticket before the year 2000. Here's the lowdown. An arc fault is when electrical connections, think switch contacts, wire terminations, and breaks in conductors, spark or arc due to intermittent contact. The arcing and sparking causes heat, which breaks down conductor insulation and presents the opportunity for fires. Note that there are two kinds of arc faults. The first is a series arc fault, and it is an intermittent contact in a single phase, like a worn-through wire or a loose termination or splice. The second is a parallel arc fault, which occurs when there is a short between two phases or a phase to neutral or ground. But we aren't talking about a dead short. We're talking about a short that is high resistance and intermittent, so it is causing an arc. Because it isn't a dead short, it will not cause a circuit protector to trip. Situations which could cause this condition could be a drywall screw piercing a cable, or if an electrical cord is pinched by a chair. We've discussed arc faults. Now let's compare them to short circuits and ground faults. A short circuit is when a current deviates from its established path and makes contact with the neutral, ground, or another phase. The deviation causes current flow to lose resistance, and the current flow will suddenly increase, exceeding the fuse or breaker capacity, causing a trip. A ground fault is a specific type of short circuit. In a ground fault, the current makes incidental contact with ground, but the contact is of high enough resistance that the fuse or circuit breaker does not operate, or does not operate fast enough to prevent electric shock. Ground fault hazards can be eliminated with ground fault circuit interrupters, also called GFCIs for short. While arc faults can lead to short circuits or ground faults, when the short circuit resistance is very high, they likely won't cause trips or operate GFCI protection before a fire is ignited. This is because they will look like a load to those types of protection. As previously mentioned, arc faults may lead to short circuits or ground faults, but may not trip fuses or breakers or GFCI protection. AFCI protection recognizes the characteristics of an arc fault and interrupts the current when the arc lasts more than a few milliseconds to guard against fire hazard. Arc fault protection is typically set at 75 amps for parallel arcing and 5 amps for series arcing. Arc fault protection came to be in the Canadian Electrical Code in 2002, and we'll get into that in a bit, but the CEC has a few definitions we will clear up before we get there. The first one is arc fault protection. Arc fault protection is a means of recognizing characteristics unique to both series and parallel arc faults and de-energizing the circuit when an arc fault is detected. The next definition from the CEC is a combination type arc fault circuit interrupter. It is a device that provides both series and parallel arc fault protection to the entire branch circuit wiring, including cord sets and power supply cords connected to the outlets, against the unwanted effects of arcing. Finally, an outlet branch circuit type arc fault circuit interrupter is a device that provides both series and parallel arc fault protection to downstream branch circuit wiring, cord sets, and power supply cords against the unwanted effects of arcing, and also provides series arc fault protection to upstream branch circuit wiring. Moving on to when AFCI became a thing in the CEC and how it has morphed since then. In 2002, the CEC introduced AFCI in Rule 26722F. It required series and parallel protection of all receptacles in bedrooms of dwelling units. Note that a dwelling unit, as defined by the CEC, was a space that had cooking, eating, living, and sleeping facilities. 10 years and 3 code cycles later, the CEC added an exemption from AFCI protection to any dedicated permanently labeled sump plugs located in bedrooms. The exemption was added because the sump motors tended to trip the AFCI due to the sparking nature of motor operation. And we all know that tripped sump pumps make for impromptu basement renos, and those aren't that much fun. Next code cycle, in 2015, the CEC moved arc fault protection to Rule 26724 F and G. It expanded the use of AFCI, requiring them on all dwelling unit receptacles rated 125 volts and 20 amps or less. There were a few notable exceptions, those being bathroom receptacles, refrigerator receptacles, kitchen counter, island, and peninsula receptacles, as well as any dedicated labeled sump pump receptacles. 2015 also allowed AFCI receptacles to be installed instead of breakers, provided that the first device was the AFCI receptacle and that it was fed from the panel by armored cable or from conductors in metallic raceway or non-metallic conduit or tubing. In 2018, arc fault became its own rule as 26656. AFCI exemptions were expanded and clarified in this year. Bathroom receptacles could only be exempted if there were no other receptacles on the circuit. The Saskatchewan interpretations added AFCI exemptions for certain receptacles, such as septic and central heating equipment, freezers, and dialysis equipment, as long as they were dedicated and labeled circuits. As well, the interpretations clearly defined that buildings outside the dwelling unit, such as sheds and detached garages, also did not require arc fault protection. Another change in 2018 was the ability to use arc fault receptacles to protect downstream when adding new receptacles to an existing circuit. Not much to add in the 2021 code. The only thing that changed was the rules on arc fault moved to Rule 26658. And in 2024, there were no changes to arc fault at all. So what are the current, most up-to-date rules on AFCI in Saskatchewan? Combination AFCI is required on all dwelling unit receptacles that are 125 volts and 20 amps and under, except bathroom receptacles, provided no other receptacles are on the circuit, refrigerator receptacles, kitchen counter, island, and peninsula receptacles, dedicated labeled sump pump, septic, central heating and related equipment receptacles, dedicated labeled freezer receptacles, and dedicated labeled home dialysis equipment receptacles. AFCI protection for new circuits can be any combination AFCI breaker or an AFCI receptacle at first device with the supply from the panel wired in AC in metallic raceway or non-metallic raceway tubing or conduit. When adding new receptacles to existing circuits, they can be AFCI protected by installing an AFCI receptacle at the first new device. And receptacles outside of dwelling units, such as detached garages or sheds, do not require AFCI. Our acceptable methods of installation of arc fault protection then look like this. Install a combination arc fault breaker at the panel to protect all branch circuit wiring and devices. Be sure to check the breaker carefully, as not all arc fault breakers offer combination protection. Also be aware that some manufacturers do not make or sell arc fault breakers. This may require outlet AFCI protection, which is detailed next, or possibly a sub-panel installation of a manufacturer that supplies arc fault breakers. In a new branch circuit, install a combination AFCI receptacle as the first device of a circuit. This will protect the whole circuit from series arc faults and the downstream wiring and devices from parallel arc faults. Remember, when wiring a new circuit in this fashion, the AFCI receptacle must be the first device after the panel and must be fed from the panel with armored cable or the feed must be installed in a metallic raceway or non-metallic conduit or tubing. Also, ensure line and load terminals on the device are connected to the proper cables. Finally, when adding or replacing receptacles on existing circuits, the first receptacle must be AFCI, and again, ensure line and load terminals are on the proper cables. Arc faults are a fire hazard. Install arc fault circuit interrupters as per the Canadian Electrical Code and the Saskatchewan interpretations to mitigate the hazard. If you have questions about your AFCI installation, call your local electrical inspector. That's all for now. Hope you found this TSASK Tech Talk informative. Have a great and safe day.